Would you buy a house near train tracks? My fiancé and I are considering putting an offer on the house, but the road it's on backs up to train tracks. It's through some woods and doesn't appear to be visible at all, but we would obviously hear it. It doesn't run often, maybe a few times a day. Would this deter you from buying a house? See if there is a train crossing nearby. If so, then the train is going to blow. That is way harder to get used to than just a passing train. I really liked living near railroad tracks. Made things a little more interesting. Kind of nice to hear the trains at night. Depends on if they use horns. I live a mile or two away from train tracks and they lay on the horn constantly in the heart of the city, who makes them blare them at every intersection. I'm used to it, but a couple of our Airbnb guests have complained about it. Would rather live next to the rails than near a busy street. The noise is more predictable. Tracks yes. Crossing no. You're sleeping and 3:00 in the morning some yahoo starts laying on the horn for a solid mile before the intersection. Nope, but I find the sound very soothing. I used to live right next to an airport, and I loved that too. We did once. After a short while, you don't even pay attention. I've spent the last 13 years of my life next to train tracks. I bought my first home last year, right next to tracks. I don't even notice. I miss the sound of trains. Out of the 5 places I lived in, my current place is the only one where there is no train. I miss the sound so much that I sometimes hear phantom train horns. After a while you won't even notice it anymore. Best advice? Rent a house nearby for a night if available on Airbnb and live in it and see if it bothers you. You need to find out how often and late do they sound the horns. Yep. We live near across a street and behind trees and shrubs tracks that sees 2-3 trains a day. It rarely bugs me, you get used to it. Most residential areas won't allow them to blow their horns unless there's something on the tracks and they have to slow down. If it was a super busy track I might think twice, but a couple times a day isn't a big deal to me. Done it and no. House shook every time train went by. Windows rattled. Back then they could blow the horn at 2 a.m. I lived next to an exchange station for years. Train cars would crash together as they linked and unlinked. It sounded like thunder and I found it soothing. One weird thing though is I didn't realize that the noise chased away the sounds of birds. I've since moved away and am just stunned by how loud the bird noise can be. Lol. I like it, though. Anyway, I didn't mind the trains. As others said, you get used to it. Been there, done that, never again. I grew up near train tracks, so the sound soothes me. No concern at all with buying such a house. Just don't. I currently rent and am right near a track that goes by a national ice cream chain plant and they blow off their horns all hours of the day and night. Delivery. When I was growing up, during the hot summer nights with windows open, I could hear the trains coupling and decoupling in the rail yards miles away as I lay in bed at night. I find train sounds soothing and nostalgic. Our latest house is about 1-2 miles from a train track and I enjoy it when I actually hear it, which isn't often. The very first night in the new house, the vibrations from an oncoming train woke me up and freaked me out. I have not noticed it since. I lived near trains tracks in my youth. After a while, you tune it out. This question has been asked before. It may not deter you, but it may deter others when you sell. Remember, it isn't just about you. Absolutely not. It will affect your future sale too. Nope, I love the sound of trains. On my commute home from work I drive through a little neighborhood of bungalows along a railroad track and I love how retro it all looks. It really depends. If it's at ground level or in a trench, it may not be that loud. If it's elevated it can be very loud. I'd hang out at the house, and see what you think. I lived pretty close to train tracks but not next to, for many years. I worked in a building next to a station. The railroad trains weren't bad, but the subway wheels and braking were terrible. I was in an apartment building immediately behind a subway station, and they had such good windows it didn't matter, etc. No. If you live near an intersection and train tracks, the train horn will probably wake you up at night. My parents lived next to train tracks. There was a 10-acre field between the tracks and their house, and you couldn't hear it inside. Outside it wasn't very loud either. If it's not near an intersection, I wouldn't mind. I would within earshot but not directly beside one. I grew up next to a high-traffic railroad, and as a kid the sound and vibrations used to put me to sleep. I could throw a rock and hit those trains. I now live to a railroad where they work on the trains all night and move them slowly. I don't even notice them. When I was a kid we lived about 250 feet from the railroad tracks. After 2 weeks we didn't even notice it. You forgot what happened in Ohio? Check what it sounds like when a train goes by. We live near train tracks and the sounds can be smoothing. But they blow their horn right outside our place every time. And it wakes us up. Every time. It's awful. If there's a railway that you can hear, absolutely don't buy this house. Same with a busy street or airport. No. Those horns can be loud, that can suck if they run at night, early evening. I avoid it just as much as major roads. You might get used to it, but it will 100% affect the value of the home and sellability when you move. I wouldn't buy a house near train tracks. I do think I am more bothered by sounds than the average person. But, anywhere in the area, you probably can hear the damned horn. I just sold my house after 25 years. There were no tracks nearby. I literally don't know where they came closest. All I know of is 2 miles away, but that damned horn every night. No. Too loud, and I don't want my kids playing on or near our tracks. I grew up watching those horrific NTSA commercials on train safety, and I am still afraid of train tracks. The amount of people I see stopping on those things are insane. Absolutely wouldn't buy a home close to train tracks. Beyond the loud sound, it tends to do damage to the foundation and structure in some cases. We had a store that was across from tracks, and, though we had expansion joints built in, the tile was always cracking in the floor. Also had issues with cracks in the sheetrock. If I had the option to live somewhere else, nope. Have you actually been there when the train has gone by? You really can't make a decision until you're there while it happens. We live less than 100 yards from tracks, but like your place, there are woods between, so we can't see the trains. We live in Florida, and once we put in new hurricane impact windows and sliders we never heard the train again. I'm always surprised when I'm outside and can hear it, because I forget it's there. The difference is the windows. I don't think our trains whistle, though, so I can't speak to that. Or maybe they do and I can't hear it. Do any come through overnight? Are you light sleepers? How are the windows? Depends on a few things. 1. Is there a crossing nearby? If so, they will be on that horn at all hours. 2. Does it run during the night? Early mornings on weekends? 3. Are the tracks easily accessible, and do you have children that will be playing outside? 4. Is there heavy freight or toxic chemicals being transported by said train? Be prepared in the event of a derailment. Currently live near tracks, but I am fortunate that they are commuter rail only MF during reasonable hours. Not if I had kids. Never. Ever. No, I would not do it. But I'm really sensitive to noises like that, and planes, helicopters. Basically all of the everything. We live near-ish a military base, and the Ospreys have not been good for my mental health. So think it really depends on how you two are with noises. Have you ever lived in an apartment with super clumpy upstairs neighbors? Or similar? How about talk the neighbors and get a gauge if the impact